Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Hunstead, and today we are giving you part 2 of our allergy and anaphylaxis series with Dr. Nadia and Cub Care. Let me tell you a little bit about CPR Kids first. What we do is we empower parents and families with the life-saving skills of baby and child first aid. We're all paediatric nurses and midwives, and it's so important that everybody knows what to do in an emergency. But the good thing is that when something does happen, you've got the Cub Care team to help you as well with all of their paediatric emergency physicians. So, Dr. Nadia, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Cub Care?
Yeah, sure. So I am a paediatric emergency physician and a general paediatrician as well. At Cub Care, I think we're 4 weeks since our launch date now. So we're a kind of after hours service for paediatric emergency type presentations, all through telehealth. So if a hospital trip turns out to be necessary, then we can help with advice around that. But we're trying to manage conditions that could be managed in the home without having to have that disruption of going to hospital.
Oh, fantastic. Now, anybody who has spent endless hours in an emergency department waiting room will be incredibly pleased that this is around, and I certainly have done that with both of my kids for sure. Now, one thing before we keep going, can everybody please just give me a wave or a thumbs up just to let me know that you can hear and see us well? And remember, please tag anyone in the comments below who you think will benefit from this information. And in particular, what we will do is actually put this to both the Cub Care and the CPR Kids pages for you to watch at your leisure repeatedly if you would like. Now, this is part 2 in our series. Last week, was it last week? It was last week, wasn't it? Yeah. The time, it either goes so short at the moment or it's, anyway. I'm just keep rambling, but anyway. So what we talked about then was what is allergy and anaphylaxis? What are the differences between a mild to moderate allergy and a severe allergic reaction? How to use an EpiPen? All of those sorts of really important first aid things that you need to know. But this is part 2. So what we're going to be getting into today is about keeping your child safe once they have been diagnosed with an allergy. So I'm going to hand over to you, Nadia, and please start.
Great. So I guess I should start by saying that we are aware as emergency physicians that when you come into the hospital with a child who's had an allergic reaction, that we give you an incredible amount of information in a relatively short space of time and then just send you off your way saying, just don't eat peanuts or whatever it might be anymore and go and see an allergist and get some testing and all this sort of thing. But we probably focus a bit less on how actually practical to figure out the ingredients of different foods and work your way through life with this new life-changing condition.
Yes.
So hopefully we can answer some questions and run through that a bit today. So I wanted to start by talking about reading ingredients of food products.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I don't know if that's the same on your end. But there are more than 100 different foods that can cause allergic reactions,
right.
But there are 10 that are very common. So these are legally required to be listed on ingredients of packaged foods. And a lot of products will also have an allergy summary at the bottom or a make and train kind of information as well. But if you are allergic to one of these 10 foods, it should, in Australia and New Zealand, to be definitely listed on the ingredients.
So this is a legal requirement on packaged foods. Okay, got it.
And including food that's imported to other countries, if it's on sale here, it needs to have labels.
Okay, so even if something is manufactured in another country, that for it to be imported to Australia, it must have these on the labels.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
So it's important to remember, though, that applies to packaged food. Other food, like bread from a bakery, does not have to have that information. So pizza, takeaway things, those sorts of things are in a different category of foods. But the people selling them should have available for you to look at a list of ingredients. So they should be able to tell you that information. It just doesn't necessarily have to be in writing.
Okay, excellent. So this list that you that we've just brought up on the screen here, obviously the things that don't need to have those ingredients listed. I suppose it's incredibly important that if you are buying, even if it's as simple as a sandwich for a child who may be in your care, that you really are asking what ingredients are in there. Certainly, I have a family member who's celiac disease, so they have that that gluten allergy. And I went to go and get them a sandwich with gluten-free bread, and I was asking. It was a bit of a funky sandwich. It had pretty different ingredients in it, but they could tell me that the bread was gluten-free, but they couldn't tell me that the grilled vegetables in there didn't have soy or anything like that on them. So it's really important to really, I guess, ask the questions before you actually do purchase that. That's certainly something that I needed to learn, because I had purchased going, oh yeah, the bread's gluten-free, and then, not asking those questions, and poor old family member learned the hard way not to let me get their sandwiches unless I asked. So thank you for that. What next, Nadia?
So I think also I just wanted to highlight that in restaurants, don't feel rude if you're asking people to write the information down, because it is of no use to the waiter or waitress if the chef doesn't get that information as well. So the chef needs to know what your allergies are, even if the food that you have ordered doesn't particularly seem likely to contain that allergen. They need to know not to stir it with the wrong spoon, or put it in a pan that's just had butter in it, or whatever it might be. So ask people to write things down, and if you don't feel confident, just don't eat it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing, is that if you don't feel confident, don't risk it. Exactly as you just said, just don't risk it. Yeah, it's not worth it. Okay, excellent. So what else do we need to know?
The way that they lay out the ingredients on some of the packaged products. So these are the legal requirements. So usually the ingredients list is there. Quite often that allergy summary statement is there at the bottom, and I find that really useful, because the ingredients list could be 20 or 30 things long, and if you have that allergy statement there, then you can just quickly have a look, make sure that your particular allergen isn't present, and then move on. But bear in mind, if there is no sentence that says allergy summary, you need to go back and read the ingredients in full.
Yes, absolutely. So you've given us an ingredient list here. We can certainly see that allergen summary statement there at the end, which is very handy, but take us through the rest of this.
Okay, so the ingredients list in this particular example, they're all in bold and they're nice and easy to see. That is not part of the legal requirement that the company have decided to do that, which is helpful. But if it's not there in bold, don't just assume there's no allergens. Read it carefully. I've actually found it quite tricky, because I've switched from being short-sighted to long-sighted recently, and I don't have to wear my glasses for driving. So if I'm shopping, I now need to remember I have to take my glasses to be able to read these things, or take a photo and zoom, because they're some quite small. As I said, the summary at the bottom and the may contain is an optional statement. With the may be present statements, there is a requirement that there's some kind of assessment that goes into that statement, whereby they are assessing, in reality, is there a likelihood that this product might be present? And they have established that, yes, there is a risk of cross-contamination.
Right.
So that it's a tricky one, knowing what to do about those maybe present statements. Personally, I just don't eat it if it's got that statement, but I know that there are other people who've been given different advice by their specialists. So I think follow your own specialist's advice, who knows your medical history best. But yeah, it can be complicated, but hopefully this makes it a little bit more straightforward to know what you're looking for.
Yep, exactly. And I think that's an important thing that you've just highlighted as well, is the fact that we actually really do need to listen to our specialists, because it's not just a cookie cutter approach, that it's, each child is different, each adult is different with allergy, that we really need to listen out to our own specific advice that we've been given. Okay, excellent. So Next, you've also talked about non-food sources of allergy. Now, this one, as somebody who is new to having anaphylaxis, I actually didn't think of this. Like I know this, and in the back of my mind, especially if it was a patient when I was at the hospital. But when I think of myself, I just, I just think about the food. So can you please take us through this, because this is absolutely fascinating.
So I guess allergens can be anywhere. These are some of the common places where you might find them. The soap products and shampoo products. For my family, I find it easiest to stick to the well-known eczema brands, so the QV kind of body wash things. They won't contain any allergens. Some of the eczema creams, though, might. So there are some companies that market themselves as being for eczema products, but might still include food protein. So just read the ingredients. They'll be there on the back of the product.
So when you say food proteins, could this be such things as nut oils or,
nut oils is a common one. Milk protein is another. I have latex allergy and some of the fruits that go along with that, and I'm increasingly finding avocado oil in lots of different products. I think as we're trying to be more environmentally friendly and use natural products, there's this slight risk to that if we're adding foods into things where foods are not instinctively present.
Yes.
But most of the others, hopefully schools and places that use these products will know, but I think reminding them and being careful. But also sometimes you can discover this by accident. So if you're finding your child or yourself is having a reaction that you just can't make sense of, then trying to pick it apart and go back through, remember everything that you did in the lead up to this event, what products you used, what you touched, what things that other people around them might have touched. We had an experience with my daughter actually where we were at a party and she was playing with the dog and the dog licked her and she came out in hives all over her. So we kind of administered her antihistamine, had our EpiPen ready. Watching her, we're like, well, we have a dog. This is very strange. She's never had anything like this before.
Yes.
She's fine. The reaction didn't progress, but we were just worried that we didn't quite understand what had caused. So we left the party. We organised an appointment with our specialist, and then it took another couple of months for that appointment to come through. In the meantime, a similar thing happened on one occasion with our own dog.
Wow!
She climbs all over this dog every day. The specialist tested her for grass allergies, for the dog allergies, all these things. Nothing showed up. And then, as it happened when I needed to replace the dog's food, for some reason it occurred to me to look at the ingredients. And bingo, there was fish in the dog food, and she had fish. So in hindsight, the dog had just eaten when she had that reaction to our dog at home. And at the party, people had been feeding the dog all sorts of food. So it kind of in context made sense, but it took us a few months to figure out what was going on there. So I think just be alert, be aware that there might be things that are a bit more tricky.
Yes.
And because you can't figure out a trigger doesn't mean a particular set of symptoms isn't an allergy.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible, that story. I too would have thought the first thing was, well, obviously it's the dog or the dog's saliva, but what the dog had just eaten, there you go. So it just shows, really illustrates how you must think outside of the box. So yeah, exactly. Think outside the box and really thinking what is the steps that have just happened. So really interesting. Okay, and the other one, particularly on this list that I thought of as well, is the Play-Doh. So thinking about Play-Doh, if your child's in daycare, that's something that gets used all the time. So you may be aware of it for home, but what's at daycare or at school that you need to be thinking of. Thinking as well that shaving cream may contain milk. Well, it's really interesting. My children made slime in science using shaving cream. And I know that she has a child in her class who is anaphylactic to dairy. So things like that, certainly being able to talk to the school and making them aware of that is incredibly important.
Yes, and I think I'll just say that the schools are quite good at asking, where might this product be aside from food?
Yes.
Because they know that either you're providing the food or that there's a safe plan around food, but they also know there are other risks.
Yep, absolutely. Oh, thank you so much for that, because that, I think, just really kind of gets us asking the questions about, it's not just about the food, what else can be
Yes.
in these products, and I think that's incredibly important. Okay, fantastic. So thank you. Now, we do have a few other topics that we would like to get through under the banner of, keeping your child safe. So let's start with how can your child keep his or herself safe, and at what age do you think that they can start doing that?
Yeah, sure. So I think the first part is also choosing your childcare centre and your school carefully. They have a legal requirement to have policies and procedures in place for children with any medical condition, not just allergies. We as parents have to provide them with the medical plans and information from the doctors, and then they need to do things to keep the child safe, which mostly includes quite simple strategies. So in terms of what you can teach your child very early on, they need to wash their hands before they eat and after they eat. And that's all children, not just the child who has the food allergy. If somebody else is eating fish or peanuts or whatever it might be, they need to wash their hands afterwards so that they don't accidentally cause their friend to have an allergic reaction. The other things that children can learn from quite a young age is not to accept food from other people. Don't say yes if your friend is trying to share their food. And I would say that my children consistently understood that from maybe less than 3 or close to 3.
Fantastic.
And particularly, I think when they know that something has happened to them, then they'll accept those lessons a little bit more easily. They can very early on learn to just say, I have an allergy, is this food okay? And hopefully they learn their list of allergies, if it's a list or whatever the particular ingredient might be. But even just saying, like, stop, is this allowed? And usually, like, if we were at parties and things, my daughter would check with me. Where it becomes more difficult is if there are products that look very similar to things that they recognise as being safe. So certain brands of potato chips or crackers that look very similar but might come in a variety of different flavours. Those were the sort of things that she didn't necessarily stop and go, oh, can I eat this? Whereas cake, instinctively, she knows we make special cakes for her. And so I think also being prepared for times where there might be disappointment. So if other people are eating cake and it wasn't a planned or expected thing, knowing that something nice will happen to make up for that. So that kind of trust that, yeah, I miss out on cake now, but mum will sort me out when I get home. Some kind of treat. We have at her school a stash of cupcakes in the freezer. And if somebody else has a birthday, they give her one of her special safe cupcakes. Nice. And I think actually a lot of people at school are aware that other kids have allergies, and they're trying to provide treats that are less likely to have allergens, like ice blocks and those sorts of things. So there's definitely lots of people out there keeping your child safe aside from just you. Those people well, but then have confidence that you've given them all the information that they need to help be part of that broader community. I think it's important to talk to children who don't have allergies as well as children who do about how to be a good friend and keep their friend safe. So know what your friends are allergic to, know that you can't share your food with them, be prepared to wash your hands, and if your friend looks unwell, tell your teacher, because they will be trained to go and tell their teacher, but they may have difficulty talking. So if they're struggling, you need to go and get somebody to help your friend, even if they don't want you to.
And that's so important when we consider, the percentage of people, particularly children, who actually have allergies that are in the community. We need to normalise this. It's not about making them feel different or excluded, because there are lots of ways that they can be included, but it's about opening up these dialogues, and that's incredibly important. My 12-year-old had a friend come over who has anaphylaxis to a few different things. I spoke to her mum beforehand, before the sleepover party. She informed me what I needed to know. She had questions for me as well to ensure my understanding of what needed to happen. And it was just keeping that dialogue open and constant. And I think that was the most important thing. And she felt fine with having her daughter at my house, and I felt fine with having her daughter as well, because we'd had that communication. And I think that's what the most important thing is. But I can imagine, particularly when your child is first diagnosed, as a parent, you must have anxiety that would just go through the roof. So how can you help? Can we help manage that? I mean, what do we do?
No, absolutely. So I think anxiety is, in a small amount, helpful. So you need a certain amount of anxiety, because it means you understand that there are risks and that you need to take precautions to manage those risks. But being in a persistent state of anxiety that is prolonged is not helpful. And you can't think straight when you're in that persistent state of anxiety, but also your child will pick up on it and they will also feel anxious. So I think knowing that there are strategies available, that you get used to reading all the ingredients, that most people are inclusive and will still be kind to your child despite the difficulties of feeding them. It makes it more helpful. I think that you slowly learn to have confidence in your ability to prepare safe foods for your child. And then the next step is teaching the child to take over ownership of their allergies with time, and allowing other people to be part of that kind of village who raises your child that people talk about. So I think if you need to recognise if that anxiety has got to a point of being unhelpful and problematic, and there is help available with psychologists and various other people, but I think your allergist is also an important person to speak to and just say, is this amount of worry reasonable? What is the actual risk? If my child smells peanut butter, will they have an allergic reaction? If somebody else eats a peanut butter sandwich for breakfast, will my child have a problem? So you need to ask those questions so that you can feel confident that the strategies you're following will work.
Because I think that knowledge is empowering. That how do we not become anxious? How do we not panic? Is by having information. And I think as well, there are lots of support groups out there for parents and also people who have allergy and anaphylaxis. Certainly Allergy and Anaphylaxis Australia have lots of different support things, and I will put that in the comments below afterwards as well. There are certainly lots of internet forums from people all around the world. What we encourage you not to do is take any direct medical advice from there, but being able to talk about your anxieties and, tips and tricks, even about, labeling things or talking to schools and how people have approached that, can be really helpful. But of course, the person who you get your medical advice from is your allergy specialist, of course. Now, we talked about parental anxiety, but what about the kids? Because, certainly I think about, if my 8-year-old was diagnosed, I can imagine that she would be incredibly anxious, because they have that awareness that this can really hurt them. And that can just, have such big fear coming from that. So what can we do for our kids around, whether it be they're developing a food phobia or fussy eating around their allergy?
So I think the first thing is to understand what the fear is and what they're frightened of. So my daughter went through this once. She actually got the all clear for us to start to introduce dairy. And there's this milk ladder that you follow with increasing amounts of dairy products. Unfortunately, she has not grown out of the milk protein intolerance, so she still gets gut-related symptoms. So we got to step one and we didn't get any further. Which is fine. We used to excluding dairy anyway, but from that she became very scared of trying new things.
Right.
So I think even just understanding it's not fear of food or food, it's a fear of something she hasn't had before. It's a fear of things that are mixed together, so she can't tell all the ingredients in it, so sources and that sort of thing. So understanding it first, then you can work out how best to tackle it. And again, there are dietitians, there are psychologists, there are GPs who are quite experienced. There are lots of people who you can get help from if it gets to the stage that you need help. But something I've found very helpful with her is just acknowledging that it takes bravery to try something new, and just saying, are you feeling brave today? Are you going to give this a go? Or if you don't want to, we'll try again another day, and that's okay. I think how worried you need to be depends on how extreme the food restrictions are. So if your child is difficult to feed but eats a balanced diet and gets all their micronutrients, then you can take your time. If they're not getting enough iron or enough calcium or whatever it might be, then I would see a dietitian and get some advice around supplements whilst you're working your way through building up their confidence. Another thing that's worked really well for us is trying to make meal times less threatening. So we have a platter in the middle of the table with a variety of different things on, and she gets to choose which things she has. So they're all things that are healthy. Some of them I know she likes, some of them are brand new things she's not had before. So I know that there's enough food there that she will try always, that if she doesn't eat any of the new things, she won't be hungry, and she'll get enough nutrition. And we try to introduce a new thing most days, not every single day, because sometimes you work late and you're tired and too much to do.
Yeah, there's life that gets in the way.
That challenge there all the time. There's a strategy the dietitians talk about called division of responsibility. So that is essentially the parent decides what the meal is, and the child decides which parts of the meal they eat and how much they eat. So you don't cook 6 different meals if your child doesn't eat the first one. You say, well, this is dinner. You eat which parts of it you like. I'm not cooking anymore. And they will eat something. Be confident and don't feed into the anxiety, and they will. So I guess fear doesn't just go away because there's no logical reason for it. It's kind of similar to spiders. You can tell somebody who's afraid of spiders, this is just a huntsman, it won't hurt you. But if they're scared of spiders, they still won't want to touch it.
That's right. That doesn't help.
Thing with food, just saying, oh, there's no dairy in this food or there's no peanuts in this food, you should just eat it. That won't help them to feel better. Just kind of saying, I can see that you're scared. Do you think you can be brave today? If you don't like it, you don't have to keep doing it.
Yeah, fantastic.
It sounds very simple. It probably sounds too simple, and it takes time. But at the start of this year, she would not eat sauce on anything. My daughter wouldn't eat rice, couscous, those kind of simple, basic staples. Now she's eating all sorts of things that we never have heard of a year ago, just by kind of making it as fun as possible, and also modelling good eating behaviour. So I'm going to have this first. I'm going to try that. I don't really like peas, but I'm going to eat them because you guys like peas. So.
Yeah, and I think that's so important as well, is that, the more that we get upset about it, that it's that being, take the power away from it, just take the, that focus on it, and just, make it as fun as possible, and that it just is what it is. It's what we sit down as a family, rather it being, that leading up to mealtime where everybody's just anxious and upset about what possibly, may happen. And I think that's important. Yep.
And I think there's also a lot of evidence in terms of phobias in general that the treatment of phobias is gradual exposure to the thing that you're fighting. Yes. So you can't just expect that to happen overnight. You have to expose them to new opportunities to overcome their worries on a really frequent basis, but also acknowledge that it's a real, genuine fear, and they're not just doing it to be difficult. And I think sometimes you kind of eventually convince a child to eat something and they don't like it and you get upset with them. Think about their perspective. They have only eaten this thing because they're trying to make you happy, and then you're still not happy. That's kind of devastating from their perspective. And I have certainly been the parent who's gone, please just try it. It took me ages.
Yeah.
Even if I'm saying it, I know I'm not supposed to say this, but it is frustrating. It is difficult, but it's something you can work through together, but probably not if you're not in the right frame of mind.
Absolutely. I know. And of course, there will be days that we are not in the right frame of mind, and that is okay as well. It absolutely is. So before we finish up today, are there any comments or questions from anyone? If there is, can you type them in the comments below? That would be fantastic, and we'll be able to go through that now. But just to wrap up, Nadia, is there anything else that you would like to tell us today?
I think I skipped through with the school information. There's some great guidelines from Allergy and Anaphylaxis Australia around different age groups. So their recommendation is that for children under 10, there's a medical kit at the school that is accessible, but not necessarily with the child themselves, because young children do certain things. Whereas once they get to grade 5 or 6, kind of encouraging the child to be involved in their own medical care is important. So starting to transition to them having a kit that they carry around with them, because they'll need to do that at high school. They're more likely to get to school on the bus and need to have their medications with them during transit. So again, it's individual. Not every child is going to be ready in grade 5 for that transition, but just thinking ahead of the next stages. Moving from childcare to school is a big transition. Moving from school to high school is a big transition, and talking to the people who know your child's medical history about how to manage that transition and also that anxiety, both for yourself and your child. I think it's also really important.
Absolutely. Thank you. Now, Jess has asked a question. So Jess says, do you have any suggestions around toothpaste? So anaphylaxis to coconut, so concerned about glycerin or the toothpaste we look at for kids. Do you have any suggestions with that at all, Nadia, or is this just about...
I don't have specific recommendations of which brands will be suitable, but the coconut comment reminds me that coconuts are not classed as tree nuts, so they're separate in their labelling requirements to the tree nuts statement. So if you can't find the information just by reading the product ingredients, then I would just email the manufacturers. And with my latex allergy, I do this often. Toys that might be rubber, they don't state if they're synthetic or natural rubber. Just email them. They sometimes take a few days. They'll reply quickly and say, oh, I'm not sure, let me talk to someone in manufacturing, but they'll usually get back to you fairly quickly. So trying to use Facebook pages and information on websites to your advantage. So I would go to the big brands and say, do you have a toothpaste one that's particular one that's safe for me? They'll usually be happy.
Fantastic. That is really great advice to the ability to be able to go straight to the companies. Excellent. So, Dr. Nadia, you have we've gone through quite a broad range of subjects that we really have, and to cram that into 30 minutes is really quite a feat. So well done. And of course, what we do know is that, unless we were sitting here for the next 47 days, we can't talk to you about everything that there is to know when it comes to allergy and anaphylaxis, of course. But that's why there are so many good resources out there. So we will be putting some comments down below, links out to some excellent resources. If you have come across some fantastic resources in your experience too, please share them down below. I think this is a really important thing because, of course, any good evidence-based assistance that there is out there is incredibly important. So, Nadia, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been another fantastic session. We would definitely be doing another child health subject again very, very soon with Cub Care Health. So stay tuned to that. please make sure that you like both CPR Kids and the Cup Care pages so that you can stay up to date when we do so many more of these live webinars to bring you really good information around your child's health. So thank you so much, Nadia. Have a fantastic day.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. And we'll see you soon, everyone. Okay,
Yeah.
bye-bye.
Bye.